Well, good morning. Thanks for joining us here on the Market Day Report. I'm Marlon Bowling with you, and we are going to be talking about a bunch of export sales business. We got our weekly export sales numbers this morning. We have some overnight business to talk about. So we have a bunch of data to throw at you here this morning. Buckle up and let's review what we have. Let's start with a look at our weekly export sales numbers first. And then we'll get to the others and add them here in just a moment. Okay, here we go. On the corn last week, we sold 1.16 million tons of corn, and the trade was looking for 600,000 to 1.2 million. Score. It was right in there, and it was right at the upper end of the trading range of estimates, I should say. Soybeans came in 1.08 million tons. The trade was looking for 900,000 to 1.5 million. So right in there where it was supposed to be. Soy meal, 193,500 tons. Trade was expecting anywhere from 100,000 to 400,000, so again, right on target. Soy oil, 2,600 tons last week. Well, that was right in the middle of trade expectations there as well. Now, on the wheat, we had 354,300 tons, and that was an improvement from last week. It was up 29%. The trade was looking for 225 to 500,000, so again, right in there. Now, on the next page, we have grain sorghum at 139,000 tons this time around. That was down 63% from that wildly active week that we had last week. We had upland cotton at 439,700 running bales this time, and rice at 36,000 tons. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Now, clean the slate. Let's look at the overnight business that just came in. Remember, we had some business yesterday of, what was it? We had several batches. We had soybean sales over 900,000 tons yesterday and, about 250,000 of corn. Well, here we go this morning. It's all soybeans. And we had the first batch, 1.044 million tons of soybeans specifically to China. They're not beating around the bush on that one. And then another large batch of 662,500 tons to, wink, wink, unknown destinations. And a lot of times we know where that ends up. But anyway, it's classified as unknown right now. Look at that, 1.66 million tons sold just overnight. That's more than we sold all last week. I want to bring in Mr. Brian Hoops, the president of Midwest Market Solutions, to see what he thinks about this. Okay, we've been running up the soybean market. Now we know why. Somebody's been in there hedging that business. So now, does that mean that's the end of it, or do you think there's more to come yet?
Good morning, Marlon. I guess that's the million-dollar question. We talked a couple weeks ago that China was meeting with some delegates in Des Moines, and they signed some agreements, and they did not specify how much purchases they were going to make. They signed an agreement to buy U.S. soybeans. It didn't say how much they were going to purchase or when. But we are seeing renewed demand from China once again. As you've been mentioning this morning, those export numbers were very strong. Out of the 39.7 million that we sold this last week, China was a buyer of about 25.4 million bushels of that. So they were aggressive buyers. And if you look at the sales that were announced this morning, that's 38 million bushels to China, another 24 to that unknown, which undoubtedly will end up being China. And we saw big sales yesterday and the day before. So we've had a tremendous week of sales. Next week's export numbers will be, red hot. And part of this is a hedge against what's going on in South America. I'm sure everyone remembers last year Argentina had a drought, and that pushed demand for U.S. soybeans and soybean meal to, especially meal, to record type levels. Now we're starting to talk about drought-like conditions in northern Brazil and Mato Grosso. And, just put it in perspective, Mato Grosso is a big enough state that they produce more soybeans than the states of Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota combined. So we were talking about a huge area that's under drought type stress. And then in southern Brazil, You're looking at flooding, rains, possibility of some replant because of all the damage that's been done. And then, that's what we're seeing is a hedge against that. These purchases, of course, could be canceled if they need to. Otherwise, this is going to help out our soybean sales tremendously. And also thought it was interesting this morning, CONAB was out and they lowered their estimate of the corn crop. Last year, Brazil's corn crop was about 130 million tons. USDA in October was at that 130 million as their estimate. So we'll be interested to watch what they come up with this morning. But CONAB lowered it by 11 million tons because of reductions in planted acres due to these weather conditions.
Let's take a look at how we finished up overnight. And of course, the overnight business closed about 15 minutes before this overnight business was announced. So keep that in mind here. December corn was down 3.5 cents overnight at 472.5. On the soybean trade last night, we had January down 3.5 cents at 1362.25. Gee, I wonder if they'll change their mind this morning now. If not, then we know it's baked into the cake. In wheat overnight, we had Chicago December down 7.5 at 584.75. So it looks like we've been taking back what we gained yesterday. December Kansas City wheat was down 8 at 647. And we had Minneapolis spring wheat showing December at 729.75. That was down 5.75. And on the cotton market, we finished up last night with December. Look at that, up 159 points at 76.48. Hey, we had some beef and pork export numbers as well. A little hint, big surprise coming, so stay tuned right after this. We are talking with Brian Hoops this morning of Midwest Market Solutions. We ran through the grain export sales. Lots of bullish news there. Let's take a look at the meat export sales last week. Maybe a bit of a surprise. What do you think, Brian? Beef, 20,600 tons, and that would compare to, what is that? That's 21% below what we had the previous week on the 2023 portion of that. That turned out to be 13,600 tons. And then you have the pork sales. What is this? 51,300 tons sold last week. Holy moly, that's up 58% from a week ago, and that wasn't anything to sneeze at last week, Brian. Wow. I mean, wow. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, we talked about China being a big buyer of soybeans. They returned to be a buyer of pork, and that really made the difference from last week to this week. They bought over 13 million tons of that number of pork. So when you see China step in, they swing heavy. They buy large quantities, and it can really improve, or if they're out of the market, limit how much sales we have. Mexico, of course, was the best buyer of U.S. beef once again, and that has been the pattern for quite some time, probably won't change. So we saw big sales, as you mentioned, for pork. Hopefully that's a supportive feature for that market. The beef sales, we need to have these type of sales or even improve upon these sales going forward. Our slaughter pace likely to start to slow once again as packer margins really starting to dip in the red here. We were probably $83 to $90 negative yesterday. This morning it's been reported at about $103 a head negative. So those margins certainly hurting as the box beef is not really starting to pick up speed and move higher. I know we should have like a seasonal low in that box beef here anytime before we get into holiday demand.
China bought beef too, didn't they?
They were big buyers of everything this week, yeah.
All right, let's review yesterday. Let's look at live cattle. Our quotes are from bar chart here. And on the live cattle board, look at that. December was up 62 at 179.40. And we had February up $1.05 yesterday on the close. So a strong finish. Yesterday on feeders, we had the January up $1.95 at 232.77. So a strong finish there. And on lean hogs, well, we finished up yesterday with the December down $1.40 at 71.50. You want to venture out any penny calls this morning on livestock?
Yeah, it was a wild day in the cattle market yesterday.
Yeah.
I would hope we can see some sort of a continuation of that rebound that started yesterday and not see that heavy selling that occurred just shortly after the opening. That's going to kind of be the key here as we're starting to look for that cash trade develop later today or tomorrow.
Okay, and of course, don't forget we have the WASDE report coming out later on today. That'll be out at noon Eastern time. We will have live coverage right here. So don't change that dial. Do they still have dials? Anyway, thanks, Brian, for all the help. I appreciate it. We'll talk again tomorrow. Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. I'm showing my age, aren't I?